You're probably thinking to yourself, what on earth does Oklahoma look like? Is it really just all cows and wheat fields? In this video, I'm going to share with you the truth about what Oklahoma actually looks like, from small towns to our large cities and even some mountains. In today's video, we're going to discover the great state of Oklahoma. I'm not positive that a lot of people actually know what it really looks like. I mean, unless you're from here, of course. But trust me, there's a lot more than what meets the eye. So buckle up and let's explore the nitty-gritty of our state. Oklahoma is 77,000 square miles, and within those 77,000 square miles are a lot of small towns. Small town culture is really different than culture within larger metros. I'm actually from a small town called Claremore. You may have heard of it. Will Rogers is from there. So Claremore is located in Rogers County, which is right next to Tulsa County in the northeastern part of the state. And whenever I lived there, Claremore hovered around 15,000 people in population. And I did graduate from Claremore High School. So that was a pretty big high school whenever I was going to school there, and it's even larger now. So most small towns follow the same structure as Claremore, and a lot of towns, of course, are much smaller than Claremore. There's an old downtown in nearly every small town in Oklahoma. So these have buildings that were built usually in the first half of the 20th century. And those buildings used to house things like courthouses, bathhouses, hotels, restaurants, and the like. So many of these cute little small downtown areas in these small towns are now things like restaurants and antique stores, other things like little boutique shops and flower shops and different things like that. So if you remember from my previous videos, Oklahoma became a state in 1907. So cars were like on the rise, but that didn't mean that a lot of people in Oklahoma actually had cars. So we still had a lot of horses running around at that point, especially for a rural place like Oklahoma. Many towns in Oklahoma were shaped by the railroad because it was one of the only ways to move things long distances back in that time period. Roads in Oklahoma are built on a grid, and it's always so crazy to me to go to places like California or Maine, because in those states, like, the roads aren't straight. None of them. They're not straight because there's, mountains and oceans and old buildings that they don't want to go through or tear down or run into. But in Oklahoma, the roads are straight and everything is built on mile grids. So when you do see a road in Oklahoma that's curved or offset from the regular grid pattern, it's because there was a railroad situation involved or a river or a lake that it couldn't run into. So there are two major cities in Oklahoma, Tulsa and Oklahoma City. Now, I have a video that covers the differences, like the pros and cons between the two of them, so I'm not really gonna cover that. I'm gonna cover some other things in this video. Now, I grew up not in Tulsa, but outside of it in that town called Claremore. So I went to Tulsa a lot, and I still do go to Tulsa a lot. So Tulsa is an older city than Oklahoma City because it was an Indian territory, and it just started about 50 years prior to Oklahoma City started. So Tulsa is built on a grid system, and you can see how downtown is kind of offset from the grid system, but it still has that system, and that's because of the railroad and the river. Tulsa boomed with the discovery of the Glen Pool. So the Glen Pool, it was a giant oil reserve just outside of Tulsa. Driving through Tulsa from the west, you're gonna be immediately greeted. So if you go from Oklahoma City to Tulsa, you're gonna see refineries first as you roll into Tulsa, especially if you're driving through downtown, and it smells a little bit. So I will warn you about that. But you can't really smell it, that smell from any houses or anything. So it's just, what makes Tulsa tick. It may be surprising to learn that Tulsa is actually a port city. There are two ports, the major one in Tulsa being the Tulsa port of Catoosa. It's one of the most inland ports in the entire world. One of the most unique things about Tulsa is the presence of Art Deco architecture. There are quite a few buildings featuring this Art Deco architecture, which you don't really find in any other cities in the US as much as you do Tulsa, which is kind of wild, but it's because of when the boom happened. So the Union Depot, you have the Boston United Methodist Church, and the Pythian Building. There are several others that, have this Art Deco thing going on with them, which I think is really cool. And sometimes it can look a little over the top. Oklahoma City is pretty different from Tulsa. It's a lot younger, and during its teenage years, during the founding and stuff, it was just a cow town. So people were moving cows directly through the city. Most people who frequented Oklahoma City in the 70s, 80s, and 90s gave me this really funny look whenever I talk about how beautiful Oklahoma City is. And that's because in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, Oklahoma City was pretty much a wasteland, especially in the river area, which now is like the most beautiful part of the city. So what changed was this program called MAPS, which they, everyone voted on it in Oklahoma City. I don't live there, but I live close to it. And basically they decided to revamp the city. And one of the major things, of course, that helped with this was the Oklahoma City Thunder, which is our NBA team. So the center where they play is amazing. The Scissortail Park is right across from it. We have the Omni, which is a beautiful hotel, and the new convention center. Like, it's really fun to hang out in this area. This area is pretty walkable. Like, I like to park my car and head out for an, day of exploration, usually during the week, but Saturdays are really fun too because you can always go to the farmer's market and stuff in Scissortail or at the Myriad Botanical Gardens. What's really cool about Oklahoma City is that it feels like a conglomeration of small town downtowns. And there's a reason for that, and it has to do with the land run and how everyone ended up settling in Oklahoma City, and that's why it's it is really different from Tulsa. I suggest you check out my Everything You Need to Know About Oklahoma City video. I will link it up here for you. Okay, let's move out of the cities for a minute. So Western Oklahoma is technically comprised of everything west of Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City is right in the middle of the state. Now remember, a lot of this video is my opinions, so if you're gonna come at me about any of this stuff, please do so in the comments and let's have a really fun argument together. Western Oklahoma is best described as flat. I tend to liken it to a desert, which makes sense because whenever you drive west from Oklahoma City, you hit Western Oklahoma and then the Texas Panhandle, which is pretty dry and flat and empty, and then New Mexico, which is a desert. So that's kind of the transformation that happens for the topography of the United States. Oklahoma gets a lot less rain than Eastern Oklahoma, usually. This year has been a little bit weird. So when you drive through Western Oklahoma, what you're gonna see in Oklahoma is a lot of fields of crops, specifically corn, cotton, and wheat, and you'll see irrigation systems that are around and working those fields to get water to those crops. So Eastern Oklahoma is where I grew up. So as I said, I'm from Claremore, and Claremore is featured prominently in the musical Oklahoma. So if you haven't seen that, go watch it right now.
I got to Kansas City on a Friday. By Saturday, I learned a thing or two.
So Eastern Oklahoma gets a lot more rain usually than Western Oklahoma, and you can really tell by all the trees and the streams and the mountains. We'll get to mountains in a minute. Ponds and lakes, which there are lakes in Western Oklahoma, but I think the ones in Eastern Oklahoma are better. That's just me. And you still have cow pastures and crops in Eastern Oklahoma too. Oklahoma is a transition state. So in Arkansas, we have mountains. So that's on the eastern side. And then in the Texas Panhandle and New Mexico, you have desert. So Oklahoma is like a slow transition from really beautiful mountains to really flat, open, beautiful spaces in Western Oklahoma. So northeastern Oklahoma, where I'm from, is actually the foothills of the Ozark Mountains, which are primarily located in Missouri, or Missouri if you're from Missouri, and Arkansas. Oklahoma has 3 mountain ranges. So you may have sort of guessed this when you watched the musical of Oklahoma, when you took that break a few minutes ago to watch that 2-hour movie. So the opening scene, it takes place in Claremore, and there's actually mountains in the background. And when I last watched that, I was like, the heck? Because I hadn't really watched it since I was probably 12 or so. The musical Oklahoma, the movie that I'm talking about that we would rent from the library as a child, it is actually filmed in Arizona, not Oklahoma. So the mountains are very different in Oklahoma than they are in Arizona. So there's really no mountains that are visible from the Claremore train station. So Oklahoma is home to the Washitas, the Wichitas, and the Arbuckles. So the Washitas sit in southeastern Oklahoma, And mostly they're actually in Arkansas, but they have this beautiful pocket in southeastern Oklahoma, and they just look incredible, and they create this kind of incredible scenery. And if you've been to Hochatown, you know what I'm talking about. So the Ouachita Mountains and the Ouachita Forest actually kind of butt up against each other, and there's actually kind of this famous trail that goes through the Ouachita Forest, and it's 223 miles long, and it like starts in Oklahoma and ends in Arkansas. The Wichitas are another mountain range, and they are located in southwestern Oklahoma. These mountains are really different. So they have these big boulders on them, and they're very short. So living in Norman or Oklahoma City, it's a very popular weekend activity to go hiking in the Wichitas. Now the Arbuckles are actually my favorite mountain range in Oklahoma. So they are about an hour south of Norman, where I live, on I-35. And these mountains are some of the oldest in the United States, and I became a little bit obsessed with them when I took geology as a freshman at the University of Oklahoma. Probably the most popular spot in the Arbuckles is going to be Turner Falls, which is Oklahoma's largest waterfall, and it's really pretty. My favorite hiking trails are located in the Arbuckle Mountains, specifically in Sulphur. So I'm Marcie Billen, and I'm actually a real estate agent here in Oklahoma with Team Realty, that's my team, and Keller Mulinix. If you liked this video, would you go ahead and hit subscribe? So what you'll get whenever you subscribe to my channel is a lot of information about Oklahoma, particularly central Oklahoma, and a lot of information about real estate. So go ahead and hit subscribe, and please hit that bell so you don't miss any videos. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.